Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Family Law. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's focus on Harry's side of things. In general, I do love that this episode in particular, it's all about family law anyway, so it makes sense, but this episode is really specifically about relationships. I'm kind of all across the board, especially when it comes to Harry's situation. In an instant, he had two girlfriends or two lovely ladies in his life, and he walked away with zero and chlamydia. Chlamydia's the only thing he walked away from because he was with someone else and he didn't tell her that he was with other people, but then he kind of got mad at that other person for not telling him that she was with other people. And it's like, well, she's like, oh, you're allowed to kind of be with as many people as you want to, and I'm not able to. He's like, no. It's like, well, are you with other people? And he was like, well, and she's like, see, you're a hypocrite. So it's like, yeah, because you didn't have any. She's like, you're the one that didn't like wear protection and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, because I didn't know you were like sleeping with other people around town. And it's like, so that ends up becoming an issue with one of his exes decides to sue him, and he ends up having to get Abby to represent him. And I think it speaks volumes that out of any, he didn't get Daniel, but I think it's because of Abby. I don't remember if it was before or after this that she found out that his ex was being represented by her former firm. So, but either way, he's like, once again, he's always going to lord it over her head of like, yeah, I kind of bailed you out, so you kind of have to do this for me. So it's like, right, he's like, she's kind of stuck in that crappy situation. And you could tell, like, because Daniel can see them spending so much time together. He's already has his suspicions about, like, right, you were drunk, dad covered for you. And she's like, almost like, yeah, believe whatever you want to. Yes, for 33 years, he wasn't in my life while he was off kind of raising you as his kids. So yes, he might owe me something. You could tell, like, Daniel kind of hit him like, yeah, I mean, it is kind of a thing of, yeah, dad, you really weren't there. Like, it is like, yeah, it was just kind of us. So I think for him, he recognized sometimes he kind of lets that, like, he'll forget it sometimes, but other times he won't let Abby forget, like, she's just kind of brought in by their dad's sympathy. But other times it feels like he does legitimately forget. It's like, well, I say that, but like, your dad bending over backwards for you is the least he can do considering everything. But it's also like, you and Abigail have common ground in the sense of you're so stubborn and you won't overlook the, like, your differences. You don't even recognize the similarities. You both have, like, Lucy can recognize her dad's issues, but she has a much better relationship because as Lucy kind of puts it, he kind of worked out like his failings as a father when it came to Abigail and his shortcomings with Daniel. But Daniel still holds those shortcomings and gets him. And it's like, right, like, Abby has every reason to kind of be as pissed off as she is, but Daniel does too, because once again, it seems like he has a lot of grievances towards his dad. But either way, I also love that Jerry's in the middle of this, because at first it's like, oh, you can't let anyone know about you representing me in this case. And she's like, because at first she walks in and it's like, and Harry's like, don't worry about it, Jerry knows everything. And she's like, lucky me. But now it's like, cool, now she has to go up against her old firm. Tried to put out because she knew how her old firm was going to play this. It's like, right, there is precedent over like suing someone over STI, but it's usually like an STD situation of it being life threatening. I always bounce back and forth because I never fully know the difference between the infection and disease aspect of it. But that is usually, either way, she's trying to handle this situation because she knows her firm is going to try and, it's like, oh, the emotional distress, or like add on, like kind of like fudge things a little bit just to make sure they can get like a bigger settlement out of this. So she tries to put out an offer and make her sign an NDA because they're trying to keep this hush hush, but she doesn't want one. And it's like, cool, now they have to set it, because it's like, right, can't have the meeting here because that's going to draw too much attention. Harry doesn't want his business out there. So now it's a situation of like, cool, we got to go there. And so she has to walk through her former office, and return. The prodigal daughter, the pariah rather, has a return. Which there was that one lady, and I was like, oh, hi, Miss Bianchi, and just like, oh, hi, Wendy. So it's like, not everyone in that building is like whispering about her. So despite who she is, she probably had decent because we don't really know we know her relationship with her former boss, but we don't know. It seems like at least one person in the building like was kind of like okay with her. So, but I almost feel like that person might be like the Cecil a little bit, which it's not even like Cecil 100%. It's like always kind of shows respect to Abby in any regard too. So I don't know. But it was just kind of nice knowing there's at least one person being like, oh, hi, Abby, you know. So, and not even just calling her Abby, like calling her by her last name. So, just think that's kind of an interesting little detail. But ultimately, Abby was able to get the whole thing settled with just, well, you know, and the $30,000 offer and an NDA being signed, along with getting like her father to apologize, because it's like, hey, let me tell you how it is. This man sucks. I mean, terrible relationships, failed marriages, failed relationships. I mean, left wounded girlfriends, and doesn't have a great relationship with his children. You're actually kind of lucky that you found out about it. Like, he's not a great guy, so you kind of escaped all the BS of it all. So it's like, right, you deserve better. It's like, he owes you an apology. And Harry kind of gave a half-assed one before, but it's like, Abby's like, tell her your house, and he really apologizes. So, and that did go a long way. So, and Abby got an opportunity to show up her boss. And I think in the long run, and this is something I brought up when she ended up running into her boss a couple episodes ago, I figured that when it's all said and done, and I could see this easily being a season 1 finale type of thing, that she will get the opportunity, like she'll either like bring in a big case or do something really good, and maybe this episode in particular will go a long way in building back her reputation. Her boss being like, all right, I was kind of quick to shut you down. You can come back. And I think she's going to maybe choose to go back to her old law firm maybe for a little bit, but then eventually come back to work for her dad. I don't know. That might not be a season. I'm having not seen the rest of the season. Once again, I know all of season 1 is done and all of season 2 is done. That could easily be a season 2 storyline, if anything else. I mean, that could be the end result on where we land at the end of season 2 or something. But, you know, just kind of theorize. It feels like this is that type of story where that could end up being the case. So, I mean, it worked out in the end. Everything was resolved. I mean, granted, Cecil super screwed up, and while Harry was on the phone with the person had given him chlamydia. Now that got announced to everyone, which I love for Abby, because initially Daniel was like, oh, I saw you. I heard from, I looked at, Jerry was on the phone, and I know you and Harry went to your old law firm, so they're suing you, and he had to represent you. And she's like, oh, remember that game of like hot cold? She's like, where are you going to need a parka? And she's like, told you you were cold. So it's like she got to be like, I was actually representing our dad. But I think I could see that easily bothering Daniel, because it's like, wait, I'm the trustworthy son. I'm the son that you know so well. That's the daughter, you took her in out of sympathy. And now also apparently you're covering for her drinking that could have brought down this whole firm. Because once again, I think on some level, whether he'll admit it or not, he has been driven by sympathy because he felt bad for her, especially what Jerry said of like, why are you so hard on her compared to your other children? I mean, don't get it twisted. Like, he's hard on Daniel. I think he's a little softer when it comes to Lucy, but he doesn't like hold any punches when it comes to Abigail. And I think he's still probably a little softer on Daniel, but like they kind of get the same treatment, and he's trying to make up for it because he isn't the same person. But I say for Daniel, it's still like so both of your daughters get the nicer treatment, even the daughter you didn't really take recognition of until recently, and now you're giving her softer blows, but I'm the one kind of still getting like pummeled the same way before, in a metaphorical sense of just like you not really noticing me, So I could definitely see that kind of irking Daniel's nerves more and more. And I do, and like I said, because this episode is about relationships, you have the whole situation with him and Danielle. Because everyone's kind of giving their advice, like Abby's giving her advice, so is his dad being like, sign a prenup. And he's like, oh my God, Joe, if I got one before like Joanne, he's like, well, I should have got one with your mom as well. He's like, Jesus, like, cool, Dad. Throwing in our dead mom like that, that's super cool, Dad, And like seeing all this relationship stuff, because the case they're investigating this episode is about a guy, Ira, and Helen. Helen has Alzheimer's, and she's been put in a home by their daughter, Miriam. And so it ends up being this whole thing of he no longer has power of attorney over her, and he wants to put her in a new place because he feels like that place isn't treating her well. Because the place is kind of going about things in a different way. Like, for example, Abby sat down with the guy, Lionel. Lionel, like, stops at that, like, fake bus stop that they included just because it's easier to let people pack their bags, sit there for a while, kind of forget why they were there in the first place, and then just go back to their rooms rather than being like, this is your home now and having to deal with all that, which even Abby's like, that is pretty cruel. And he's like, what the lady was like, yeah, but the real cruel thing would be, kind of reminding them that basically they're locked in a box type of thing. So it's like I can see both sides of that argument. So, but I could see why that would like that way of handling things. I could see why it could bother Ira, especially when he finds out like his wife is forgetting him more and more, and it. But also like this was important to Daniel because they used to be living across from them. And they were the foundation of what he believes a good relationship is Helen and Ira's relationship. But now it turns into, and it's almost this neat parallel because obviously Daniel has complicated, relationship with his dad, and Miriam now does too. Because now they're like both on opposite sides of like, she wants to keep their mom, Helen, where she is, where Ira wants to take her out. Interesting thing, I didn't realize this until like after the episode was done. The actress who plays her attorney Winnie, her and Ira the actor who plays Ira were both in the show Continuum. So I mean, I'm sure they're both Canadian actors because it's like because I watch enough shows that are Canadian now, I'm starting to recognize like familiar faces in shows and stuff like that. For example, like the actress who plays Winnie, I recognize her from the show Travelers, which I think a lot of the actors, if not. I know that specifically is a Canadian show, so it makes sense. Like most of those actors are. I want to say that's the most recent thing I saw her in was Travelers as Grace, if I remember correctly. If that's her character's name, yeah. So yeah, I just think that's interesting. Just like I said, I didn't put together the continuum correlation. It's interesting too because it's like, well, that was on Sci-Fi. I know Miriam was in a short-lived show on Sci-Fi. I think also a Canadian show called Ghost Wars, which is also interesting because this is on the CW, which was also on the CW was also a Canadian show. It's Coroner, and Roger Cross was in Continuum. I'm connecting so many dots just off of that. It's a whole. I digress. But my point is, this whole relationship was like the foundation of Daniel. So like that's why he's taking on this particular case. It means a lot to him, and especially with everything he's going through with Danielle, who even asked Lucy and Abigail to be her bridesmaids because it's like, no, like I'm an only child, and it's nice like gaining two sisters, and it's like, well, Lucy being your bridesmaid makes sense, but me, it's like, no, you're just as much a part of this family, which it's so messed up, and I think especially in Abigail's eyes, where it's like, wait, the one person who's an addition to this family sees me more as part of this family than my actual family sees me as part of this family. It's like, that is kind of interesting and backwards when you really think about it. And so, like I said, things over the course of the episode really start weighing on Daniel, especially like when the case kind of like gets like really bad, especially in court, because it's like, well, because it turns out Ira found out that Lionel and Helen were having a relationship, and he was keeping that from Miriam, but Miriam already knew about it, and she was trying to protect her father's feelings, and he's like, wait, because he saw it as kind of like a statute, like he saw it as kind of like an assault situation, but it's like, no, and because Abby walked in on it. She's like, no, I'm pretty sure that seems super consensual. It's like, wait, she doesn't remember anything. So it's like, no, but she might not remember you and everything, but doesn't make it any like less consensual. Like she, maybe around Lionel, she remembers a lot and enough to be like, oh, having fallen for him. It's kind of like her second win, especially her second lease on life after, her with her condition and everything. So it's a complicated thing. And he has every right to feel that way because it's like, no, this is my wife. Apparently my daughter knew about it. Just let it go. So sadly, Daniel and Abby basically eviscerate her in court, Miriam. And apparently, like, it was like, oh, here's all this stuff that she was taking stuff from their mom's account to do stuff. But she was like, no, she ends up getting pissed at her dad because it's like, no, you're the one that told me that was okay. You're the one that made that decision, like telling me to take the family trip that, but Ira didn't know that that Daniel and Abigail were going to cut her down like that. So now it's like, cool. Now things are already complicated enough. Like, yeah, he got what he wanted, but it cost him his relationship with his daughter. And it's just like, I was like, oh, this is nasty. But then, like, sadly, because Lionel and Helen were separated, Helen's not in a good place anymore. She's not eating. She at least was happy. And that's the sad thing. Because Miriam recognizes, like, my dad is sad and angry and lonely. And he's just like, he's jealous. This is a situation that's out of his control. And he's used to so being in control. And even when it's all said and done, he's like, right, she's not even eating. He's like, what am I supposed to do? And it's like, right. He's like, I know that you love Helen, that the fact is that she meant so much to you, but even you knows like how much Lionel makes her happy. And that's what I know, that no matter even if the situation were different, you would always want her to be in a situation where she's happy. So he ends up, giving power of attorney back over to his daughter, and he kind of lets Helen and Lionel be. And it's like, that's gut wrenching, dude. It's just kind of like, that's sad. He has to let go of the woman he loves after everything. And it's like, there's like, it's a bittersweet ending. There's no like, it's a happy-ish ending, but it's also like really heartbreaking at the same time that it played out like that, So, at least Miriam, I mean, maybe this gives her dad an opportunity to try and, move forward too. It's like, right, he wanted her to be happy, and like she would want you to be happy. So maybe that's something Miriam can kind of, help her dad move forward through. But, at least their relationship is potentially, going to repair itself after this. Once again, Daniel and Abigail having very complicated relationships with their dad. But the end result is that Daniel ends up breaking off his engagement to, Danielle, because you notice certain things throughout the episode, like I said, like the whole conversation about kids and stuff, especially because she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to want to have 2 or 3 kids. And she even brought up the joint account situation, because even I thought like, oh, he jumped into this because I thought it was because of the marriage, the relationship pull at the office of like everyone being like, oh yeah, you're going to break up with her within a certain amount of time. Like I knew that at the end, he didn't expressly say that, but I do believe it is a part of it, because it's like, right, people have me so figured out that they're going to literally bet on a date that I'm going to break up with my girlfriend just because I've been that. And he wanted to be, he even says to Daniel, he wanted to be someone different. He wanted to be the guy that could live in the suburbia, have the joint account, have kids, but he's like, that's just not me. And I think that's an important thing. Yes, communication is important. I mean, and not everyone's set in stone. You could feel one way about something, be like, I'm never going to have kids, and you can end up changing your mind. But those are conversations where it's like, right, like you got to realize if you and that person are on the same page. It sucks, but it's like, yeah, Danielle and him just want 2 different things out of life. Like maybe the way life is right now, he wants to continue living it that way, but maybe he won't always. But for now, they're not on the same page. Like Danielle wants more, and and he just kind of, I think he was comfortable where things are, and he once again just jumped ahead because he thought like, oh, I could fit and play this role. But he's like, no, Danielle, you deserve to be with you deserve to be with someone who you want to be like, you that wants what you want. Because for her, it's like, I want to be with you, but it's like I said, they're just at very different stages in their life. So it is sad in the end result, but I think it's better this way than being in a relationship where you're not like in sync. And it could be a situation of, if things continue down this road, you could eventually kind of end up like, Daniel could end up resenting her for the whole thing. So I think it's a good break. It was kind of necessary, because of like, if you weren't really feeling it, if you were having to pretend to kind of grow into this role of who you think you want it to be, but you felt like you needed to be for this relationship, I think this is kind of better for everyone in the long run. It's legitimately sad, but I think it is the best choice to make in this regard. Obviously, there's the whole Lucy thing, which I won't lie to you. There was a moment where Lucy was showing her wife her phone. I was like, ooh, don't do that. But it's like, oh, I guess maybe you're a lot better at this cheating thing than, which feels weird, but it's like, yeah, you're having like, cause we don't know if they've hooked up more than that one time or not, but whatever the case may be, it's like, I was afraid like, oh my God, she's going to text you at that moment. Your wife is going to see it. I thought that was going to go down. I mean, it might be a thing of, she might be pretty careful about it. She probably like might delete the text after a while just so, but I was kind of scared like, oh, you showing your wife the phone. I thought that would have been a whole thing, but because it's complicated, because now her in-laws have been staying there and they're kind of annoying because she's wanting to ask about, like, Maggie's mom wants to ask about, like, some erectile dysfunction stuff. It's like, don't have this conversation with me. I mean, I didn't even think about the parallels of like, right, Abigail had to find out about their dad's sex life. I'm like, I had 2 girlfriends. Oh, I don't want to hear about it. Chlamydia. Oh, I don't want to hear about that. And now it's like, right, Lucy's kind of getting that situation with her in-laws. Well, also that was kind of pretty neat, and just like continuing the sci-fi connection, interesting enough, if I'm not mistaken, that looked like that was Winona Earp she was watching on her computer. I was like, yeah, because that looked like that was Waverly and Nicole. I was like, yeah, getting some Earp hot action, or I guess more specifically Gibson hot action. But obviously it's like, yeah, to keep things simplistic, let's keep her Earp hot action. So I was like, I thought that was so neat. But I was also saying like sci-fi connection because I obviously the actress who plays Lucy is Janelle Williams. She was on Sci-Fi with the show Bitten, but before that, Warehouse 13. So interesting connection. Once again, I'm sure it's what. I wonder if Sci-Fi like mainly a Canadian show or a channel or something like that, because it ends up getting a lot of Canadian shows. That might just be on like because I know that's under the NBC umbrella, but that's probably like just like the CW ends up getting a handful of like Canadian shows. I think it's just obviously Sci-Fi must just have those licensing deals or something like that, or just maybe they just end up being they're probably just the U.S. distributor for that stuff. Either way, I'm getting caught up in the tangents, but little by little, we're just like taking steps more and more in that Lucy and her. I mean, obviously, like they're joking about the whole like having fun together thing of like, oh yeah, my parents, I can't stand them either. But like they're having fun. But I'm also just like, yeah, that's awesome. But then I'm also just in the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, but Lucy cheated on. Like you can't quite like that. It just, I don't know, man. It's just hard to kind of escape that in my head. It's interesting because like obviously like relationship stuff is a struggle for like everyone in that family. Harry's got his complications. Abby tried to talk to Frank, but Frank's like, oh, you're taking shortcuts. If you put in half as much time as it is to get around all this stuff. Which she even asked later on, she asked like Lucy like, hey, do you know a therapist? It's like, oh, I thought therapy was blah, blah, blah. It is, but Frank's insisting. So, because it's like, oh yeah, the 3-month like review is up soon about the situation of their the custody situation. So she wants to make sure, like she wants to prove like, no, I'm in a good place because I don't want us to like, I want us to take a step forward as a family rather than like having to take a step back with the legal means and legal stuff. So there's that. Lucy kind of made an offhand joke about kind of like, oh yeah, not one, like, oh, that's another strike in a column to not have kids. Because her, once again, kind of similar to like Danielle, like Lucy hasn't really, I mean, at least from what we've seen, she hasn't been vocal about the fact is she doesn't want kids. She's kind of kept that to herself, and kind of avoided her wife every time her wife's kind of brought up that conversation. So I don't know, because you can tell like this episode, I think it was really fun because it's just them and like, oh my god, she's like, I love your parents, but God, there's so much. So I think there's that because it's like it's just them situation. But then we start going to the conversation of like kids and stuff. So. It's a different situation, but it's like, once again, relationships are all about communication. So I don't know where the Lucy and Maggie thing is going to go because they want different things. Once again, there's always a possibility Lucy can change her mind, but for now she's very steadfast in not wanting kids, but Maggie's kind of all about having kids. So, so like I said, it's just an interesting thing that like everyone in that family is kind of going through their issues. I even love this kind of like ending it on a little more of a funnier note. It's the effed up thing where like Harry was like, don't ever put me in a home. If I ever lose my mind or anything, he's like, put a bullet right between my eyes. And Abigail's like, oh please, like, and I will gladly pull the trigger. And he's like, ha ha ha. And then later on, it's like, she's like, I was just kidding about pulling the trigger. I mean, if anyone was going to do it, it's most likely going to be Joanne, her mom. So I thought that was kind of cute. So either way, I am very, very interested to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Like, is there going to be any more about Harry and his chlamydia going forward? We'll have to wait and see. Probably not, but I could definitely see that being like a small background bit in the future episodes. But either way, I'm excited. I'm very excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.